one thing I always find fascinating is that actually plants cannot move, right? It seems really basic, said like that. We're like, yeah, of course they cannot move. Well, but if you think about it, throughout the year, these organisms have to resist heat waves, floods, different temperature
Yeah.
in certain places in the planet's excursion during the year of about 50 degrees Celsius. All of a sudden, no water for months.
So Alberto Campanaro, head of science at Zayndu, thank you so much for joining me on the Vertical Farming Podcast.
Oh, hi, Ari. Thanks for inviting me. It's great to be here, finally.
So where are you calling from?
You mean professionally or personally as a human?
Where's home for you?
At the moment, I'm Italian, but home is in the UK. Been in the
Okay.
UK for almost 11 years. I
Mm,
think almost 12. So kind of a 30% of my lifetime so far,
okay.
even more than that. So by now, I would say home is between Italy and UK, splitted. Families in Italy, rest of the life is in the UK.
What part
So
of Italy did you grow up in?
northeast, like a
Okay.
small place, really, really small. But the nice thing about it is that it's basically situated equal distance from the mountains and the sea. And we're
Mm,
like 8 kilometers far from Venice. So for
okay.
us, when I was young, it was and as well now, it's pretty easy to just jump in a car or on a train and go to walk around a nice city as Venice. So same way, just hop in a car and then go have a big walk, big hike in the
Mm,
Alps, which are equally
that's
incredible.
nice.
And to be honest, I miss quite a lot the mountains, but yeah,
Yeah,
it is what it is. We don't have high mountains in the UK. I
that's
think,
true.
yeah, I think that I do remember. I think the Ben Nevis is the biggest one, but I don't want to say at what it tops up. But it's not quite like the Alps. That's
No,
I'm
no,
quite sure about it.
nothing is quite like the Alps,
Yeah.
for sure. What is your favorite memory of growing up in Italy?
Oh well, man, it has to be family. Actually, my favorite memory.
Mm.
Um, has to be going and walking the mountains with my grandparents. Really, with my
Oh wow,
grandfathers. Yeah, yeah, yeah. If you want to go down that road, I have to say that. I have to
of
say that.
course.
Yeah, I've got this memory of one of my granddads taking me around. We were going looking for mushroom to pick up.
Oh,
Actually, yeah, yeah. And of course, we're kind of playing because none of us were sort of allowed to pick and choose which mushroom to take home and eat because it could have been dangerous.
of course, deadly.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. But yeah, that's one of the memories I've got when I was a really, really young kid. But yeah, I think, yeah, that's a big one for me.
Yeah, of course. Is that also your earliest connection with like food? Because a lot of times when I think about earliest memories of food, it always comes back to family, and especially growing up, I'm sure in a place like Italy, you think about maybe your grandparents' kitchen and how
Yes.
influenced, your adulthood.
Yeah, how it influenced your life and sometimes your professional choices as well,
That's
right?
true. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it is of um grandparents cooking, also my parents, to be honest, because they always cooked a lot as well. So let's not forget about them as well. Let's not forget about them. But yeah, this for always there memories of grandparents going out, picking some veggies out of the garden and just cook them on the spot. Yeah, yeah. And now that you make me think about it, this is actually quite interesting because now that I think about it, I spent a lot of time with both my grandparents.
Yeah.
Just growing veggies in the backyard,
Yeah.
preparing the soil, planting, watering, and all that. So yeah, this is an interesting thing. I never thought about it. I think I don't know what. Well, then that's what makes a good host, I suppose, because I never thought about this. And
It's curious for me because I grew up in New York, and so I grew up just outside New York
yeah,
City, and then I lived in New York City. So I've always loved growing up the energy of big cities, and I'm sure that's something you
yeah,
experience now in the UK as well. And I kind of always thought that was going to be my life. And then I lived in LA as well, and I got connected to the mountains there. So I can relate to the mountains. I miss the mountains because I
Hmm.
live in Minnesota now. But I used to go on hikes a lot there. And again, but it was still a city type of environment. And now that I'm in Minnesota, we have a bigger yard, just under an acre, and we're planting a lot of things in our garden. My partner's family grew up as
Hmm.
hunters, so hunting deer, turkey, and you don't really have that connection unless it's either in your family or it's something you were taught that's important. And so it's interesting
Yeah,
now. I have more of an appreciation for where food comes from, and it's not from a supermarket shelf, like it's
yeah,
as most people think.
yeah. I think that's part of one of the problems you have. Well, problems, effects we have on our society is the disconnection of people from food. It always
Yeah.
make me feel, but think about an amazing book that I read a while ago from Michael Pollan. I'm sure you know
Yeah.
him,
Yep.
and he was discussing this thing, and he said, "Oh, in his book, he was trying to to visit different kind of farms, from the industrialized farms to
Yeah.
going to the small regenerative farms, and then he was ending by hunting these deers and cooking it. And I never thought about that. That for us, food is just a box of plastic on a shelf,
Yep.
actually. So we have to do it because, we're a complex society with a lot of people, and it doesn't make any sense that everybody grown his own food. But yeah, it just created this connection there, or you've been lucky enough to experience the connection of a lot of people they will never do, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what was the driver for you to go to the UK?
Well, I think I need to answer this, and it's gonna take me a lot of time. Depends how
We
much
got
time
time.
you have. Yeah, well, let's
We
try.
have time.
Basically, what happened is that here in Italy, I was last year of university. And for us to have a degree, you have to start to work in a lab, right? You have to
Okay.
work in a lab for 1 year, make your own experiments, make your own things by yourself, make your own thing by yourself, write up the piece, and then decide what to do afterwards. And actually, I was not having, before starting that, I was not having any idea on what I wanted to do after, or any clear picture, let's say. But starting to work in a lab, and luckily I always wanted to do something that I could see and touch. So my degree is in industrial biotechnology, and
Okay.
I start, and a lot of my colleagues at the time, friends, were working with yeast fermenting stuff or
Okay.
bacteria producing medicine. And I decided to go for plants because I said, I want to see them. I want to see what happens. I want to touch it. So I went
Where
for
did that
plants.
impulse come from? That this the desire to work in this field?
I don't know. I just felt
Yeah.
like I needed to work with plants. I just felt like it's something I wanted really to do. I always been fascinated by plants, not only from um, food production perspective, but also from a research, basic research perspective. One thing I always find fascinating is that actually plants cannot move, right? It seems really basic, said like that. We're like, yeah, of course they cannot move. Well, but if you think about it, throughout the year, these organisms have to resist heat waves, floods, different temperature
Yeah.
in certain places in the planet's excursion during the year of about 50 degrees Celsius. All of a sudden, no water for months, right?
Hmm.
And mammals or animals can move around, right? There's no
Yeah.
water. Okay, let's go find it, right?
Yeah.
Or for us human, oh, it's really cold. Let's go find a cave. But for plants, they're not allowed to.
Yeah.
They're not allowed to, and they have to resist whatever gets thrown at them. And I always find it extremely interesting. Something that, sometimes we don't think about it because we just give it to a cow. They don't move. But I think it's what makes them such a complex organism.
Yeah.
Whatever they need to produce by themselves, and they just do it from water, oxygen, CO2. That's it. And I always find it absolutely fascinated. And I'm pretty sure that whoever you would ask the same question to whoever comes from a plant science background, it would tell you pretty much the same thing. There's a fascination towards an organism that's to be self-sufficient without moving an inch. So yeah,
Especially when you get into the science of it, I'm sure you can see it at a level that's most people will never understand, whether it's a molecular level, what's happening at a photosynthesis level. You learn the basics when you're in school, photosynthesis. Yeah, I get it.
yeah,
Sunlight, chlorophyll.
yeah,
But when you start to look at what's happening, like under the scenes, and even if you look
yeah,
at trees, for example, you start to see like the roots go down almost as high as the tree goes up and
yeah,
how they start to communicate. And you start learning about mushrooms as another living organism that is actually communicates with others below the ground. It becomes really fascinating. I can see how that could become like a beautiful rabbit hole for you. The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know.
it is for so many people. And then people just get into, the more your career progresses, usually if you stay in academia, you just go down a single little detail and you just work on it and smash it and try to entangle molecular mechanisms that drive
Hmm.
a single protein for all your career. Well, that goes also not for, for plant scientists, or for other kind of scientists, but I always think it's fascinating. It's really interesting how that can drive, how the curiosity for such a little detail can drive people for decades.
Sounds like
Yeah.
it's driven you for decades. And I guess
It
that's part of
did.
how you ended up
It-
not understanding what you were going to do after university, but something was pulling you towards the UK.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, if you want to go back to the question, is that, yeah, when I was doing my thesis work, I was lucky to have a couple of really good mentors. And, I just started to be passionate about it. And I've been directed. I said, they told me, yeah, what do you want to do after this? Do you want to do a PhD? You seem pretty competent and passionate. Do you want to do a PhD? I said, yes, of course. Never thought about it until they asked me the question. And once they asked me, I said, yes, I want to do it. I said, do you want to be here in Italy or do you want to go somewhere else? I said, please send me somewhere else. I just wanted to go somewhere else, see a different reality, see how it goes. And then also, there's also that part that says sometimes in Italy being a scientist in Italy can be tough. And sometimes also, for even simply for ego, you get attracted to go to places where there is more money, more investments. So you say, oh, if I go down there, I can afford to do that and that experiment that I was never been able to do. Simple as that. And I've been directed. So I've been quite lucky to apply to a couple of them, and one I won it. And I found a fantastic supervisor and then I moved to UK. I was in Durham. I moved when I was 25 years
Okay.
old-ish. Started
Yeah.
my PhD. Yeah, well, I was an old lad at that time. In UK, all my colleagues, in Italy, we finish university later. We are older compared to the guys in UK. So I was starting my PhD, and my colleagues were like 2 years younger than me, which
Okay.
at that time feels a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, and also there I started to also to get in contact with the commercial side of it, because while I was in UK, the PhD that I won was sponsored by KWS, who is a huge multinational seed company. And I started to work on cereal on wheat specifically. And that also was an interesting part in my professional development, because I've been able both to work in academia, because I was doing my PhD at the university, but to be exposed as well to big corporate, to the companies and what it is also to do applied science. And they don't require different skill doing basic research or more applied, but it depends on what you like more. There's definitely two different ways of approaching the problems. And I enjoyed for a while to work on the edge of it. It was really fun. But Yeah, I guess, I can boil it down to a couple of interesting points. There is actually, as we said before, in academia, you have your professor, your team of guys that are absolutely obsessed by just small little protein for all their career. And that's amazing. That's amazing. But then I was lucky as well to have a fantastic company supervisor from KWS, Ed. He's a great guy. And he always told me, Alberto, always remember that you guys look at your protein. And what we look at in here is 5 things. Yield number 1, number 2 is yield, number 3 is yield, number 4 is yield, number 5 is yield. We don't care
I
about your
see.
proteins. As long as your protein gives me more yield, right?
Yeah. Was that a bit of a wake-up call for you?
I think it was something that made me really interested
Yeah.
into the approach, right? Because of course you cannot do one without the other, right? Because what you do in basic research now is what going to enable you to have an increased yield 10 years down the line, right? Because that's the reality. But at a certain point, I started to be more intrigued by the fact that, I don't want to wait 10 years. I want to get an impact now, to generate an impact now. And it's not me really getting my head into a small little protein for decades. I just want to see the bigger picture. I just want to work with plants out in the field. I want to do things differently. But of
What
course,
was your experience, Alberto, with controlled environment agriculture at the time? Is it something that you had been aware of, or is it something you started to learn more about as you started to enter this field?
I knew it was existing, but before my current role, I always worked with open field crops. I
Yeah.
always worked on model species and or cereals out in the field, wheat, barley,
Okay.
that thing. So that was all my background. Because I work with wheat for KWS. Then I've done a postdoc. I was sponsored by BASF, working on specific high-tech fungicides, also on wheat. So before my job at Zayndu, I always worked on open field material. So
Okay.
thousands of seeds, a few times a year, and dozens of flowers coming out of it.
So what was the biggest shift for you as you started to apply all the knowledge you have in open field and all the experiences you had in open field and how you ran experiments and all the research you've done? What was the shift for you, or what it had to change for you in terms of your thought process when you started to look at things from a controlled environment?
It's an easy answer. Nothing. The way you do things is
Yeah.
exactly the same. You
Okay.
just use different plants in a different setting. But what you actually do from a technical and scientific perspective, how you set up trials, how you set up tests, how you set up experiments, how you analyze them is absolutely the same. There is absolutely no difference. And I think that's the only thing you have to relearn a bit is, you work with different kind of plants. So you just have to learn a bit how they grow, how the plants are supposed to look like, what's their harvest cycles, what's their phenotype like. But besides that, the basic knowledge and the basic techniques that you acquire when you're a young scientist and then you refine throughout your career, they are the same. The principles are the same. That's a really interesting part about science in general, is that, I can take one of my data set and it happened also, give it to a professor of Nottingham University to assess. And these guys never worked in controlled environmental agriculture. Maybe they just only work on model species in basic science, and they can simply look at it and say, yeah, it makes sense. So that's quite the beauty of science. We all can do it, and we all can cross-check it with each other. And we can all speak the same language, even if you work in a field and I'm glass house and the other guy is a vertical farm. We're going to have different challenges, namely, I don't know, maybe when you work in broad acre, the main challenges in setting up your trials is always the weather. It's always difficult to know when to go out and plant, because maybe there's too much drought or last minute it start to rain, so you have to delay your planting, and that may impact the phenotype that you're looking at. But this, while, actually, now that I think about it, in controlled environment, it's quite a bit easier because we can plant whenever we need.
So I love that you mentioned that there's not a difference between, the type of research you do within CEA. Can you talk a little bit about how you got connected to Zayndu and Ralph and the team, and what was it about what they were working on that attracted you and interested you?
Well, so at that time, I think to give you an idea of the time frame, we were going through one of the last lockdowns here in the UK. And at that time, I really wanted to change. I was still a postdoc in university. I wanted to change it because I just wanted to go off from academia and go into more applied research. And, I had some offers here and there from super big companies, super multinational companies. And what I always thought is, if I go there, just going to be doing my little experiment and then going home in the evening and just sort of being a small part of a big mechanism, and nothing wrong with that. And then I thought, I was wandering around the internet, looking for jobs. At a certain point, I got in contact with a recruiter, and he told me, "Hey, I've got a position in a startup company. What do you think about a startup company?" And I was like, "Startup company? I never thought about it. So sounds exciting." Then I looked up Zayndu's website, and I thought, "Oh, this looks quite cool, to say the least." Because at that time, also the website was not as flashy as it is today. It was not as full of data as it is today. It was not clickable as it is today.
Very startup.
Yeah, absolutely. And they were looking for a plant scientist. And the technology was really cool. I was like, "Oh, you can do this and that and that and that. You want to do prime, you want to make the plant grow faster, you want to have more yield, and you do it just with electricity." Okay. So I just started to know more. So I called back the recruiter. I said, yeah. I mean, let me find me an interview date. And in the meantime, I just started to look it up on the internet, say, what's this thing?
Yeah.
And it turns out that, Zayndu technology is based on cold plasma seed treatments. What it does is just you basically rearrange the molecules of the air with plasma and just you throw this chemistry to seeds and it does stuff. It makes plants grow faster, etc. We can talk about it later. I started to look it up into the internet, and it was something quite sound because it was a process that has been studied for like, I don't know, a decade or something. I thought, "Oh, I've never seen this before." When you see this thing, that you look at the website and you think, "Oh, it's quite interesting, but do I believe it? It's quite interesting, but do I believe it?" Then you look it up on the literature online. That
Yeah.
I will go on the classic PubMed or on the classic Sci-Hub when you don't get access and when you're a broke postdoc in your living room, but don't tell anyone.
Yeah.
And you find papers from like, I don't know, a decade ago, but even more recent, doing experiment on this plasma seed treatment. You're like, well, I need to know more. So that's how I get in contact. And I had an interview with Ralph, CEO, and independently with Felipe, who is the CTO and one of the founders. And I just thought, "Oh, these guys are sound, really." And I like the guys a lot, and they liked me a lot. So they invited me over for a day to have a look at what they have and what they have on site. And I can tell you right now, it was really, really startup. It was like 4 boys in a shed kind of thing, which made me think, "Oh, okay." I was coming from a kind of a rich hub group with flashy
Yeah.
equipment and stuff.
Yeah.
And I was there, I thought, this is quite interesting. I can do this. And it was also, the technology was sound. And also, at that time, and still, I was looking for do something of impact. And technology as Zayndu is incredibly impactful from an environmental perspective. I think about it, it's just you can just push plants to grow faster and stronger just with electricity. Means that
Mm,
if you can put a couple of solar panels up your roof, you can do it completely with an impossibly low carbon impact, CO2 impact or whatever. And that was extremely powerful to attract me to it. And yeah, and that's how it all started. Ralph offered me a job and I accepted.
what's interesting about the
Mm.
story, Alberto, is people who are put into the same experience that you had, if they saw the four guys in the garage,
Eh,
you know, they do one of two things. They say, whoa, this is pure startup, very risky, not for me. I need my security. I need to be working at a company that's more established. So I think it speaks to maybe something that's inherent in your nature, maybe this ability to try new things. Or what do you think it was in you that made you decide you see that, someone else sees that and turns away and goes in the other direction, but you see it and you see potential. You can see where this is going. You've done your research, so you know the technology is sound. I'm curious, like, what your thought process is there.
I think multiple things. I think, first of all, it was that a technology like that with this potential, especially in terms of green credential, needs to be supported. First thing for me at the
Okay.
time was that. Um,
Yeah.
because remember, the year before I was working on pesticide, and then I was there. I felt like, no, I need to support this right now. And then that's the first part. Second part is that the team gave me a great impression. They were really, really, I've been able to feel both the passion and the technical knowledge. And I clearly seen that what was missing in there. And there was someone who knows how to work on plants. You're having these two guys that often they didn't know semiconductors and plasma stuff, right? But they were very, they're pretty good guys. And I thought, oh, I can trust them. And then the other side, the third part is that what does security mean when you can have fun?
Hmm. I love that.
Honestly, that part, because maybe it's my personality, especially at that time, I was like, oh, growing something from four guys in a shed to something bigger, it's going to be fun. Establishing a plant lab from nothing, because it was really nothing. You know, when I went there, we built a new plant biology lab from
Wow.
scratch. Yeah. From a room that was a meeting room before, and we were the carpets from the floor with our nails, with our fingers over the weekend. That classical kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Very startup, very exciting.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I remember my first 4 weekends at Zayndu were over the weekends removing carpet on the floor. Me and another couple of guys, and then Ralph, our CEO, was coming in with donuts at half the morning or something like that. You know,
Yeah.
that kind of
Yeah.
environment. So it was both fun and interesting and exciting, really. So I think that that's what attracted me to that.
That's a great story. So talk a little bit about the technology now that you've had the experience of, and the time of being there, and applying your plant
Yeah.
science background to the cold
Mm.
plasma technology. So for folks that maybe aren't, we'll obviously link back to our interview with Ralph, but I'm sure there's been developments since then. How would you describe the technology and the benefits for growing in a controlled environment?
Well, to do it quickly, as I can tell you in a second the benefit, and then we can talk about how it works. Basically, our technology is based on a piece of kit, for the lack of a better words, in which you put seeds in, you press the start button, you wait some time, and then these seeds get primed, aka they germinate better, they germinate faster. Another important effect is that they germinate together. Yeah, you diminish the variability in plant growth. So the
Mm,
plants grow together. So at the end, when you harvest, you have more product in spec and less off spec, and they just grow faster afterwards. So you can even harvest a couple of days before than you would normally because of this increased grow rate. Because you have a better start and an increased grow rate, so you harvest a couple of days earlier. And what we all know is that if in controlled environment, you can keep sowing and harvesting, and your
Yeah.
harvest cycle diminish. It means that your facility per year can produce more because you may be able to fit an extra cycle by paying the same amount of fixed cost.
Yeah.
Well, you may need to pay to get more seeds and all that, but you get what I'm trying to say.
Sure.
So that's one of the big benefits. The other benefit that we've seen is that another way of our user use the technology is that you don't harvest earlier. You harvest the same sort of harvest cycle, but you harvest more biomass. That depends on which plant you're working with. And if you're a vertical farm or greenhouse, depends on what your customer wants in terms of specification, etc., etc. So there's a sort of flexibility in it. So you got basically a plant that is supercharged, and how do you want to use this supercharge? It's at your discretion. And to quickly explain you how we work is we're based in basically what we do. The interesting part is that we can ignite plasma at room temperature and room and normal pressure and sea level pressure, let's say. And that will generate is a cocktail of reactive oxygen and nitrogen species. A cocktail that we are able to control. Not gonna lie, it took us a while, but we've been able to sort of control it. And with that, what it does is increase the seed permeability, right? That means that when you put the seeds out, germination chamber, they absorb water that much faster. Therefore, your plants grow a bit faster, and they just sort of triggered to germinate, and they're prepared for it. And that's how it works exactly. Also, there must be also there's a physiological cascade of what happens when the seeds are exposed to the neurons. There's a physiological effect. It's not super well studied, but still a lot that can be done in terms of basic research and what happens to these seeds and to these plants once they get exposed to plasma products. And that's something that would be really interesting to research more and look at it into detail. We need one of those academics who wants to do that from the plant's perspective. That's pretty much in a nutshell what we do.
So what's been the experience as you work with this technology and you start to have interactions with your clients and the people who are using it and are seeing success? You know, and I'm sure you start to get feedback from the field of what's working and what's not. So as the product has been developing, what type of feedback has been helpful for you as a plant scientist?
Well, at this stage, in the previous years, any kind of feedback was useful because, technology in their infancy, if you look at what we were doing 3-4 years ago, it was tricky. It was maybe working 1 day, yes, 2 days, no, which is normal for a technology in its infancy. Any sort of feedback was useful. From the, hey, I'm pressing the button, I'm hearing a strange noise, to I'm planting the seeds and some of them are actually not germinating. You, in fact, killed all my seeds rather than made them germinate better, which
important
happens.
to know.
Oh, yes. And, in that regard, I tell you, we have some of our, let's say, user a while ago were exactly playing this game. We were like, oh, let's see how far we can go before killing them. We need to kill the seeds.
Yeah.
I've been asked so many times, let's kill the seeds and then let's dial down from there, which actually is really important parameter. It's one of the best way to start an optimization if you don't know where to go. Just destroy everything and then walk backwards from that.
Yeah, take it to 10 and then dial it back.
Yeah, and then dial down. Yeah, why not? It's a way to do it. And it's super interesting. But yeah, now if you look at from there to what we've done now we're more like, I might have a good idea what you should do, my user. Please make sure to do exactly what I'm telling. Otherwise, you're going to kill them. So, a lot of time has passed and things have changed a lot. Nowadays, we've got a lots of experience and we're able to help our customer in a much better way. Before we were trialing the technology. Now we are in the phase in which we optimize it to help our user to get the best that they can, which is really different.
Do you see a big difference in terms of the different crops and the types of seeds and how the cold plasma reacts to them?
Yes, extremely so. One part of it is how the seeds in fact react. And I can tell you that we have arrived to certain level of detail. For example, take spinach, for example, that we study quite a lot because there's a lot of request in the market for us for spinach to improve it. And we can see this variation response at the level of varieties, right? So we have, at the moment, in terms of plasma protocol, for example, we have 3 of them. And these 3, depending on which variety you're growing, you need to go 1, 2, or 3. And, the level of detail is quite extreme. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we were talking about, all the spinach going to be treated the same, or the lettuce is going to be treated the same. Now, not anymore. We just go down that level. So yeah, there's a variety response, not a species response. Well, species response is of course there, but that's the level of detail. And of course we see so.
It sounds like you have it's almost like a recipe, a cold plasma recipe for each
Yeah,
species and variety.
yeah, in fact, yes. So we've got a certain number of variable that we can tweak to generate the recipes for our customer. Quite a few, I would say, quite a few. And it's really, really important to have the specific one because one, if you don't have the right one, you just don't have any benefit. Or you may also go down the road of having problems. And 2, it depends on how long you want to work on optimization, and you can always squeeze more performance depending on what you want. But yeah, we have a lot of recipes. They are all adapted to different species and varieties. And it's interesting because there are some species that require a super intense plasma, while other with a medium plasma, you just kill them. So
Yeah.
it's something that we need to help our user. We support our users in doing them. Actually, we do them for them, really, because you cannot start from scratch. Otherwise, you'll never make it. You're going to need 5 years rather than 1 month, which is not interesting, right?
Yeah. Alberto, I'm curious, is there a specific size farm or operation where it would make sense to engage with Zayndu technology? Is there a place or a time where maybe it's too soon for them because maybe they're not big enough? Or what have you seen from your experience, like an ideal client and ideal time to engage with Zayndu?
So I don't have the number in my head at the moment with that. There definitely is. There's not a limit, an upper limit, because, but there's definitely a lower limit. You're going to need to have a farm. So it's a good starting point, but there is, and I'm afraid I cannot give you that number at the moment. I'm not prepared with that.
It's just something to think about. That's okay. I think it's important, and we'll have all the links available. I'm curious what, for people that are not as aware as, what a plant scientist does, what's a typical day for you look like?
Well, typical day of when I was a plant scientist, or now that I have to?
I would say now.
I would say now. Well, okay, I'll try to gain time while I think about it by saying, as I'm Italian, they always start with a good coffee, right?
Of course, absolutely.
Of course, without it doesn't work. But
an espresso.
Yeah, double eventually. Double. Preferably rather than eventually double. But the funny thing now is that the first thing that I do in my day, even if it's a while, then now I don't work anymore in the lab because I've got my team dealing with it. And the interesting thing is that the first thing that I do when I go in the office after drinking coffee, actually, the second thing is just call my guys and say, hey, let's do a lab walk. Let's go in the lab and look at plants. Because in the end, it's an old thing that one of my mentors when I was 24 told me. First thing you do when you come to the office, you look at your plants and then you open your email. And then I've done it since then, and I keep doing it. And, it's kind of interesting when you start to do it on the other side, when you don't have to explain your boss things. I can ask them questions. But the habit is there. Still going in the lab, look at the plants, show me the last experiment, give me some green, which is also give me a bit of energy because the rest of my day is ends up in spreadsheet meetings and PowerPoints
Yeah.
and reports
Yeah.
and grant application and reports to the board and talk with customer, talk with user and problem solving. Well, I have to say, still, my favorite part of the day is go in the lab and look at the plants.
Yeah.
Um,
Engaging with the living organisms, the living
yeah, but
plants. It's so interesting.
that's the core of our business.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
an agriculture business. We do not, if we don't do good things to the plant, we're useless, right?
Yeah.
That's the most important part of it. It's not our machine or it's what we do, it's how what we do impact the plants. The rest is accessory. Um,
Yeah, for sure.
or
It's
at
so
least
interesting that you
that's
say
my
that.
opinion. Yeah.
Yeah. Because we're growing a garden here, and like I mentioned, in my house, in my yard, and it's a pretty decent sized garden. And my partner, she's more connected, to the trees, to the
Hmm.
animals, the plants. She feeds the squirrels, but she makes it a point to, get her coffee and walk around the yard and see what came up today, what how the plants are doing. And I think for me, it's a shift from the city guy mentality of like, for me, it's like get on the train, get on the bus, get on the subway, go to work, get in the office, so
Yeah.
I have to slow down. And she's helping to remind me that the most important thing is to kind of look at what's changed, because in 24 hours, it's so funny how plants, they just change and different things come up and if you start to have those eyes, that awareness of how plants grow and, the from seedlings and how, quickly things can change in 24 hours, it gives you a new perspective.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. They change even in 12 hours sometimes. We've sometimes I can tell you this much. Sometimes you can have seeds that germinate so fast that we have to count that we do our germination counts every 12 hours. Every
Oh,
12
wow.
hours we
Yeah.
have a look into it because they go that
Yeah.
fast. It is what it is, which is really fantastic and fascinating. But sometimes when you're a younger plant scientist can be a pain because it means that you have to go to work over weekend.
Well, at least you're not pulling up carpet anymore on the weekends. You're doing something a little bit
Yeah,
more
you do
interesting.
something. Yeah, yeah, exactly. But yeah, that's it. I think the plants are the core, and like you say, something else in the industry is starting to be really. I'm glad that our sector is starting to be really aware of that and really
Yeah.
praising that and really keeping an eye on the plant themselves because that's what we do, right? There's
Yeah.
no way to go around it.
No. What's been the shift for you to move from plant scientist to managing now a team of scientists? How has that influenced, or how have you grown or had to evolve as a leader?
So the shift happens because I guess I said again it depends on personality. Some personality at a certain point they want more, they won't change. Some people love to stay in the bench, and at a certain point I just had enough and I wanted to have a bigger picture. And then it's kind of a natural shift rather than a decision when you start to need more people to work with you and you ask your boss, I need more stuff if you want us to do everything. So what happens is that you start to hire more people and then naturally you have to say, oh, sorry, I have a meeting. Oh, sorry, I have to compile the budget. So you start to stay
Yeah.
out more. And a different set of challenges arise. It's completely different. It's more like having a having a view from far aside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And in a sense, it's not anymore keeping an eye on your one or two experiments, but keeping an eye on 10 experiments of the all your team and understanding
Yeah.
what can be more interesting for the success of the company for 3 or 4 months down the line. Is a complete shift in
Yeah.
mentality. And also it's more like, oh, you guys are doing this. Now, in 6 months, I need to achieve that other objective that has been given me from the board or whatever. So suddenly you have to rethink everything and rewire all the program of the lab of everyone to achieve that. And that's a great challenge because it's not anymore you and your little experiments, but it's more like a wider perspective on the success of everyone else and just make sure that you can do your part for it.
What's a tough question you've had to ask yourself recently?
a tough question I have to ask myself: professionally or in my human life, or both?
I'll take both.
You take both. Okay. That's even
Yeah.
harder. That this is you're completely pulling the carpet off my feet. I don't know what to say now. I don't know what to say.
How about in professionally? Like when you think about where you're going and all the projects that you have and the objectives you're trying to accomplish with Zayndu, do you think about how you get there and if you have put it?
What I always think about, that which is always in the back of my mind, that is one of
Mhm.
the things that I guess it makes a difference when you start to go into a more management role is what should I do to make sure that the company has success? Because being successful
Mhm.
means that not only I can pay my bills, but also my guys.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that for me is getting really important because, sometimes startup life is a roller coaster. We all know that,
Yeah,
but you went through it.
yeah,
And wait a minute, I need to make sure that my boys pay their rent or their mortgage. Um,
yeah. Some pressure
and
there.
that is one of the tough questions. Am I doing good enough? Am I doing good enough? And then am I doing good enough for me? And am I still really true to myself in
Mm,
this new role that I'm doing lately?
yeah,
It's difficult. Those are more my biggest questions at the moment.
those are good
Um,
ones. Well,
yeah.
I appreciate you coming on the show and giving us a deeper dive into the world of like what happens with plant science because it's a lot. We cover it in different areas, a lot of times from the founder's perspective. So I really appreciate this deeper dive, and I think there's people that the audience that are going to be interested. And obviously, there's always people that are coming into the industry that are new to plant science and they're really excited. I'm sure you remember what the energy is like when you're first getting started with your career. So I think this conversation, I think, was a nice, helpful insight to how you got to where you are and what keeps you motivated and what keeps you moving forward. So I want to thank you for sharing your backstory and your history with Zayndu because I think it was really interesting.
Thanks, Harry. Yeah, actually, it's been really fun to stay here and chatting. It made me think about so many things that I have forgotten in time. So thank you
Yeah,
very much for this. It was really good.
yeah. Thanks again. And we'll make sure that we'll have links to your contact information and Zayndu in the show notes. And if people want to get in touch with you, we'll make sure we have that information available. But I appreciate you sharing your story.
Thank you.